title of my message today is Fear Not. The angel said, Fear not. A lot of scriptures have those words, fear. Excuse me 1 minute, just want to turn my phone off and get a sense of my time here. Put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Okay, so we've read a lot of scriptures where people have encounters with angelic beings and with God Himself. And first words are, fear not. Other scriptures advise, actually they command, believe or have faith. One scripture admonishes, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. That's in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. So, I'd like to look at a definition for the word fear. I like definitions because I find a lot of times we think we mean something, we think somebody else means something, we may not be saying the same thing. So I like to start with some common ground. So I looked up the definition for the word fear. The word fear is both, kind of like the word sin, it's both a noun and a verb. So the noun means an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. The verb is to be afraid of someone or something that's likely to be dangerous, painful, or threatening. So the word fear, like the word sin, can be something we experience or feel, as well as an action, a behavior, or an activity we engage in. So what are some of the things we fear? Anybody want to volunteer anything?
Loud thunder in the middle of the night.
Yeah, loud thunder, yes, like our dog Champ. He's very anxious when it rains and when it thunders. We fear threats to our physical security and that of our loved ones. We fear threats to our well-being, either our material needs, including our finances, and our emotional well-being. What about our inability to overcome sin? That can be a fear also. What about our lack of wisdom, lack of skill? God addresses every area of life where we experience fear. We'll get more into that later. In the scriptures, He does that in general ways, but I think He addresses that in specific ways for each of us. I also wanted to look at some of the symptoms, some of the physiological symptoms we experience when we have fear. Now, I'm quoting from AI here. Fear is experienced in the mind, but the amygdala, a small organ in the middle of the brain, alerts the nervous system to trigger the body's fear response. What are some of these triggers? For example, increased heart rate and blood pressure. Your body releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which increases your heart rate and your blood pressure. Faster breathing. Start breathing faster to prepare for some kind of response, a fight or flight or run. You may start sweating. You may start trembling. Your muscles can tighten. Your blood flow changes. You may even become nauseous. You might get chills. You may feel overheated, or you might start having chills. You might feel like you have a fever. You could get an upset stomach, and I can speak to that. You might experience shortness of breath and foggy thinking, difficulty making decisions and thinking clearly. Now, though our fears are rooted deeply in deeply held beliefs, the emotions and these symptoms that are associated with fear, they appear spontaneously. You don't really have to think about them. You don't have to exert any effort. They just happen. So keeping this in mind, what was the expectation when certain individuals were told by God or by angels, fear not? Was God actually commanding them, and did he really expect them to just stop fearing? Was it just a matter of them choosing to stop fearing and engaging their will? If so, why don't we do that all the time? Well, let's read about an experience that the prophet Daniel had. And this is written about in Daniel chapter 10, verses 1 through 19. I'm reading from the New King James Version. Not that it matters, but just in case you're reading from another version and it reads differently. Daniel chapter 10, verses 1 through 19. Starting in verse 1. In the third year of Persia's king Cyrus, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. The message was true. There would be a great conflict. Daniel understood the message, having discerned the meaning of the vision. During that night, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 weeks. I didn't eat any rich foods. Neither meat nor wine passed my lips. And I didn't clean up at all until the 3 weeks were up. Hopefully he didn't keep much company during that time. Then on the 24th day of the first month, as I was on the bank of the great Tigris River, I looked up and suddenly saw a man clothed in linen in front of me. He had a brilliant gold belt around his waist, and his body was like topaz. His face was like a flash of lightning, and his eyes were like burning torches. His arms and feet looked like polished bronze. When he spoke, it sounded like the roar of a crowd. Only I, Daniel, saw this vision. The other people who were with me didn't see it. Despite that, they were terrified and ran away to hide. So I was left alone to see this great vision all by myself. And these people did not see the vision. They heard, and I'm sure they felt something going on, and they ran away terrified. Daniel got to see it. Imagine the fear he felt. So I was left alone to see this great vision all by myself. All my strength left me. My energy was sapped, and I couldn't stay strong. Then I heard the sound of the man's words. When I heard it, I fell into a trance with my face on the ground. And then a hand touched me, lifting me up to my hands and knees. The man said to me, Daniel, you are greatly treasured. Now grasp the meaning of what I'm saying to you, and stand up, because I've been sent to you. And he said this to me. As he said this to me, I stood up shaking. Then the man said to me, don't be afraid, Daniel, because from the day you first set your mind to understand things and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard. I've come because of your words. For 21 days, the leader of the Persian kingdom blocked my way. But then Michael, one of the highest leaders, came to help me. I left Michael there with the leader of the Persian kingdom. But I've come to help you understand what will happen to your people in the future, because there is another vision concerning that time. While he said this to me, I turned my face to the ground and kept quiet. But then someone who looked like a human being touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to the person standing in front of me. Let me just pause there for a minute. So I get the impression that he wasn't even able to speak until he was given the ability to speak. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, saying to the person standing in front of me, my Lord, the vision bothered me deeply, and I couldn't stay strong during it. So how can I, my Lord's servant, speak with you, my Lord? Even now there's no strength in me, and I can barely breathe. The one who looked like a human being touched me again and gave me strength. He said, don't be afraid. You are greatly treasured. All will be well with you. Be strong. As he spoke to me, I suddenly felt strong. Then I said, my Lord can go on because you've made me strong. So, when dealing with chronic and protracted stress or trauma, how do you feel? I mean, physically and emotionally. And is that a matter of your will? Do you just decide to feel weak or sick or have any of these symptoms associated with fear? What thoughts go through your mind? And how is your spiritual condition affected by it? In fact, I wonder, is your spiritual condition affected by stress, or is our spiritual condition affected by stress, or is our stress level affected by our spiritual condition? Or is it both? The common story that we often hear is that our thoughts give birth to and fuel the feelings we associate with stress, fear and anxiety. Most of the time, we feel fear before we can even express our thoughts with words. For example, if a disaster were to occur right now, or if some dangerous, life-threatening event arises suddenly, say a deranged, God forbid, life shooter or a rabid animal suddenly threatens your life, you don't typically engage in a casual mental analysis. You don't start verbally assessing the threat and the best options for survival. No, our feelings and our bodily sensations just react. We actually do assess the threat, and we consider options, but this happens so quickly. It happens subconsciously, before we even have a chance to put it into words. It happens spontaneously and quickly. I'll give you an example. If I recall correctly, it was Friday afternoon, December 7th, 2007. I was feeling really pleased that I was able to leave work early. It was Friday. And I was able to leave work early with no drama or complications at work. And I had a very demanding, stressful job, and it was very unpredictable. I mean, I remember walking out of my job literally with my coat on, and this was in the evening. I'm not talking 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I'm talking about 8 o'clock, and I'm walking out. This happened a number of times, at one time in particular, and I was pulled back to deal with a so-called crisis. But that day, I had left early, and there was no drama, no complications at work, and I was happily on my way home, and I was listening to a Bible study. Suddenly, an 18-wheeler turned in front of my car with no warning. And I had the right-of-way. I was in the middle of the intersection on a wet road. Despite my desperate attempts to avoid it, I realized I was going to crash. I knew it. There was no way around it. There were only 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south. I was on the extreme right lane. Somebody was to my left. I was in the middle of the intersection. The truck turned. This realization happened faster than I was able to express it with words. Well, here's the thing. I didn't panic. My reactions were quick, but intentional. However, after I tried 3 times to take evasive action, I knew I couldn't avoid hitting the truck. I also knew my chances of surviving that accident were slim, and that it could result in my death. Now, I did try to avoid it. I tried to hit the brake. That failed. I hydroplaned. So there was an island on this side to the right. I thought, well, I'll just put the car there, and I cut the wheel to the right real fast, because no one thinks they're going to go under the truck. It didn't happen. The car hydroplaned again and skidded. Tried to hit the brakes again. I just skidded again. So then another realization occurred to me. It seemed that my death in that accident was no longer an avoidable, remote possibility. I felt absolutely certain. In fact, that moment, I knew I was going to be killed that evening. It was an interesting feeling. The reason it was interesting, because I always thought I'd be afraid, I'd be scared to death if I faced the imminent prospect of sudden death, especially that type of a death. And I'll just confess, I've never been a very brave person. I never thought of myself as a brave person. right? The opposite. But contrary to what I believed, I felt absolutely no fear. And I say this before God in all honesty. I didn't feel an ounce of fear. I had no conscious thought of fear, or the fear of death, or the fear of any pain. No fear went through my mind. I didn't fear that I might be subjected to any physical pain, even before death. I just felt absolutely certain I was going to die. I mean, and the thought went through my mind without words. It was so fast. I thought, oh well, I knew I was going to die one day. Everybody's going to die. I just didn't know I would die this way. And then immediately after that, another thought went through my mind, but with no words. I said, it's too bad. They're going to get a bad phone call tonight. I was thinking of my family. And these words were impressions. They happened so fast that I didn't have an opportunity to put them into words. Then in a fraction of a moment, I heard this loud explosion. Bam! I rammed into the truck, went right under it. He rolled over the driver's side, crushed the driver's side, stopped right in front. His tire stopped right in front of my feet. All the airbags detonated, windshield exploded, the car was filled with smoke. The steering wheel was, that is, my hands were jerked over the steering wheel so powerfully that this one hand got swollen immediately. Then I realized I was stuck in the car and I couldn't get out. But God helped me get out. I kind of forced the door open on one side with my knee. I was taken to emergency. I was watched for hours because I didn't realize that I was soaked, drenched in blood. They were all superficial, very superficial cuts. Took a shower that night, couldn't even find one. The police officer came to see me while I was in the emergency room. He didn't take a statement. He just came to see me. The nurse said, Mr. Rios, you have a visitor. I turned around and it's a police officer. And he said, this is all he said. When he left, he said, Mr. Rios, the angels were with you tonight. And he left. I wondered after that accident, did a lot of thinking. I wondered in my wild science fiction fried imagination, I wondered if in another dimension, ages before I was born, these events had been foreseen. I remember reading Daniel, chapter in Daniel where he sees an event, as far as we understand, hasn't even taken place even now. And a decree, a judgment was uttered in favor of a group of people, and he said that when that decree was uttered, things changed. But it hasn't even happened yet. So this group of people was foreseen ages before they were even born. Threats to their life were foreseen ages before their ancestors were born. I wonder what happens when God miraculously delivers us from a sudden and absolutely certain disaster. Does he perhaps does he possibly take us down a path in an alternate reality? Does he temporarily convert us to a being that can cross different dimensions? I was about to be crushed by an 18-wheeler. My car happened to go between the, I don't know what they call this, toolbox, things about this big, it would decapitate anyone. Just happened to go in between that toolbox and his tire. His tire just happened to stop in front of my foot. And I walked out in the middle of rush hour traffic, and all traffic went around me. Who knows what actually happens? Actually, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how God does what he does. All I know is that I walked away from that accident with an injured hand. Soaked in blood, but superficial wounds. And as the officer said, the angels were with me, or God was with me. Did my survival that day depend on anything I did? No, absolutely not. Now, I was listening to a Bible study, but that doesn't mean that I was in the best spiritual condition. I'll confess I was not at that time. At the time, I was struggling a lot with faith, and my moral compass was not always pointing north. Not that I was engaging in anything outwardly, but in my mental struggles, a lot of times I was not winning the fight. But was there anything I did to keep myself from being crushed? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. My survival did not depend on anything I did. And after that accident, I thought, and I realized that since I was a child, since infancy, I had a number of close calls. I'm not going to bore you with them. Some of you might have heard about some of these, but I went through all sorts of things, including being taken by a predator when I was very small. Taken right out of my home. Walked away at night by myself. Got home safe. Fell and apparently had a head injury, went into some kind of not a coma, but I forget what you call this. Sorry? No, not exactly, but I forget the word. When people, your eyes flip back, your tongue. Sorry?
Convulsions.
Convulsions, yes. And then I went into like some kind of a coma. My mom prayed. Came back. No, there was no 911 at that time, but not where we lived. We lived at the edge of a cliff near the ocean in, what was it? Back then a very rustic area, now it's a vacation destination. Did my survival during these close calls depend on anything I did? Absolutely not. I'm sure you may think back and think about your life and you'll realize you were saved. It had nothing to do with anything you did. For reasons still unknown to me, I was protected, spared, and delivered from disaster. So I started wondering about this. Started asking questions and pondering things. Started wondering, why was I spared? And if I was spared, why? Is there a supernatural purpose being worked out in my life? Could I have a special destiny to fulfill? Now, the book of Daniel describes events that he was allowed to observe, as I said before, thousands of years before they, in fact, some of them have not even occurred yet. So he watches these events almost as we would watch a news video of current events that recently took place. And he's watching this as it's taken place, but is yet to take place. So he sees the oppression and the near annihilation of a group of innocent and defenseless people. They're called the holy people, people of God. And it's a horrendous event. He sees this in some kind of timeless dimension, and a court convenes, and they render judgment in favor of this oppressed group. The court issues a decree, and it permanently alters the course of events, instantly. Daniel 7, I'm reading from Daniel 7, verses 7 through 22. Okay, Daniel 7, verses 7 through 22. After this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, the fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things. Other translations explain that those great things were blasphemies. I beheld, till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from him. 10,000 thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment, or the court, was set, and the books were opened. Let me skip that verse 10. I'll just get down to verse 15. So Daniel says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit, in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast. That is, Daniel wanted to know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, as nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Now here's a curious thing. As Daniel viewed the events, the change seems to happen immediately upon this judgment, this decree rendered by the heavenly court. Then, verses 21 and 22, I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints. But these events haven't happened yet. So how could this change come about as a result of that judgment, if it takes place at a future time? But the judgment has already been made because it's already been written of. So the judgment has been made, but Daniel says, as he's watching the events, this evil power called the little horn makes war against God's people until that judgment is rendered. Okay, I don't have an explanation for it, but I just so it's a curious thing that Daniel is allowed to see something that takes place apparently in some timeless dimension. It transcends time, because the judgment that he says will be given, in a sense, has already been given. But that's not really my point. I only stress that point to make the following point. Could it be that this same heavenly court convened and rendered positive judgments over not just this group of people called God's people, which could include us, by the way, but not just this group as a unit, but on the lives of every individual member of this group? Could it be that judgments, positive judgments, were spoken over your life and my life even before we were born? If the trajectory of this group that Daniel saw in his vision, and by extension the individuals in that group, if that was forethought thousands of years before their physical existence, couldn't it stand to reason that their individual lives were forethought, monitored, and made provisions for? Couldn't it stand for reason that my life and your life was forethought, and that God made provisions for the challenges that we're facing the threats that we're facing, the things that we fear. Considering this prophecy helps me adopt a perspective that transcends my personal current struggles and, in fact, my entire physical life. And it provides meaning, a greater meaning to the challenges that I have to endure. Now, Philippians 4, verse 6 to 7, which we read before, acknowledges, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. So I'd like to invite you to engage with me in a quick study of a few words in this passage. The Greek word translated as anxious in our English, King James Bible, or other Bibles might use another word, but the Greek word, the source word, is merinate. I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation. It comes from the word merimnao. I wish Jackie was here because Jackie speaks Greek. I don't. It means to be anxious, to worry, to care for. And now I'll read from Strong's lexicon. The verb, merimnao, is used in the New Testament to describe a state of anxiety or worry, often in the context of being overly concerned about the necessities of life or future uncertainties. It can also imply a sense of distraction or being pulled in different directions due to concerns. Now the Greek word translated as guard, he says the peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds. That word is translated from a Greek word, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. I believe it's phrourese. The source verb is phroureo. And again, from Strong's lexicon, the verb phroureo is used in the New Testament to convey the idea of guarding or protecting something with vigilance. It implies a sense of active and continuous watchfulness, often in a military or protective context. The term can also suggest the idea of being kept under guard or held in custody. Now, does the scripture say that you will guard your hearts and minds? No. It says the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds. Now, what did Paul write that this peace of God will guard? It says our hearts and minds. So the Greek word for hearts is kardias, from where we get the English phrase cardiac arrest. And in the New Testament, this word is used metaphorically to refer to the inner self. Put it on do not disturb. I don't know how that gets through. Sorry. It's used metaphorically to refer to the inner self, encompassing the mind, the will, the emotions, and the moral character of a person. It is not limited to the physical organ, but it represents the core of the human identity and spiritual life. The heart is seen as the seat of thought, emotion, and decision making, reflecting one's true character and intentions. The Greek word for minds is noemata, from the word noema, which means thought, mind, purpose, and design. It's derived from a word noeo, meaning to perceive, to understand. And that word, it refers to the mind's thoughts, purposes, and designs. It conveys the idea of perception or understanding, especially in the context of spiritual or moral discernment. It could also imply the schemes or the intentions of our mind, whether good or evil. So, if we were to reread Philippians 4, verses 6 through 7, adding the definitions of the key words that we just examined, bear with me. Let's reread it, adding these definitions. Be anxious for nothing, But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard, protect, keep watch over your valuable inner self that encompasses your mind, will, emotions, the moral center of your person, the core of your identity and spiritual life, the seat of all your thoughts, emotions, and decision making, reflecting your true character, intentions, thoughts, and purposes, the seat of your reason, the core of your being, your mental perception, your plans and intentions through Christ Jesus. It says a little more when you know the full meaning of the words. See, it seems that this valuable inner self needs to be protected from fear and anxiety. But how do we unafraid ourselves if we're already afraid? Can we, by our sheer will and effort, do this for ourselves? If so, how do we do it? Do we just press on fear not button? If not, what can we do? Okay, let's read this. In John 14, verse 1, Christ said, "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me." That's in the King James. The Common English Bible translates that as follows. Don't be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. I find at least with me, I don't know about anyone here, but one of the things that has caused me a lot of times to fear is realizing that my best efforts have failed in the areas that matter most to me, and that nothing is working as it should, or almost nothing, or as I had wanted or hoped. Have you ever felt that? Has anybody ever experienced that? Have you ever been so overwhelmed with things going wrong, perhaps in health and finances and relationships, maybe in all of those at the same time, that it seems that walls are closing in on you? And like Job said, that which you feared seems to be coming about. Or have you looked over the entire scope of your life and realized that despite your best intentions, you failed at almost everything that you valued and considered important? Think about the choices and decisions you made, and you realize in hindsight so many of them were just wrong. You didn't know it at the time. You did the best you could. I find that scary. If I did the best that I could, and it ended in some things in disaster, ghastly. It's like, what chance do we have? It seems that the seeds of disaster were embedded from the start, but we didn't know it. So what do? We grieve. We grieve the loss of opportunities and unintended consequences. I've been there. I'm there now. It's not a nice place, not a pleasant place to be. As W.C. Fields, I don't know how many of you remember W.C. Fields. Reportedly, he said on his deathbed, he was asked how he felt. And he said, "I'd rather be in Philadelphia." But, just recently, I thought a lot about this reality. Not to wonder why. I no longer ask why. I seldom ask that question. At one point in my life, I don't remember exactly when, but I stopped asking why. Because, number one, no clear definitive answers were revealed to me. It was a useless exercise. And also, as my inquiries often came up when I was in an emotionally vulnerable state, I wasn't doing well when the question came up, so the answers were provided to me by a negative mindset. So a lot of times the answers were along the lines of, well, you failed because you're a failure, or you failed because you're stupid, you just didn't try hard enough, you're being punished. And I could fill in the gaps for why I was being punished. It was like I could come up with any number of reasons. You're evil, you're sinful, you're insincere. You don't try hard enough, you're weak. Rarely did that negative mind provide answers that Paul wrote about in Romans 7. Rarely did that negative mind provide answers such as, well, maybe God is allowing this for His glory. Maybe by going through this you'll be able to help others. Perhaps your struggle will encourage or inspire others. The scriptures admonish us to trust God. But how do you trust when you're having a challenge? Trusting. Can you just make yourself trust? Could Gideon? God contacted Gideon directly. Now, we're admonished to have faith, unwavering faith. Can you make yourself have unwavering faith when you have wavering faith? If so, how? Press a faith button? I know people personally who speak like that. But what I have found is that often we speak to others we speak confidently to others about areas where we're confident, where we're strong, and they're not. But they could do the same thing to us. And I'm reminded of a friend, someone I knew many years ago, had been in the military, and physically he was very strong. He seemed fearless in terms of facing personal danger. But there was one thing he was really afraid of. He didn't feel confident in being able to, he didn't feel that he was well educated, and he didn't feel confident in being able to earn a good living, be a professional, get married and provide for a family, to the point that it almost paralyzed him. On the other hand, I didn't have the courage he had to face physical danger, but that was not an issue with me. But I had other things that I feared and I was weak in, so I would never look down at him. Recently, as I said, we've had quite a bit of stress at home. And stress, just like fear, causes a physiological impact. Of course, it's real, spontaneous physical and emotional reactions. Sometimes it causes just disruptions, even in your digestion. And because of certain events that have become chronic and even extreme, unfortunately, at times I feel my stomach turn just at the sound of certain things. Not terribly unusual sounds, but if something comes up in the middle of the night, my little granddaughter gets up and slams the door or whatever, I feel this fear. It's not a choice. It's a spontaneous, involuntary action that happens without conscious thought or effort. And I find that very distressing. So I began praying more and more about that. A few weeks ago, I woke up in the middle of the night, about 3 a.m. As usual, as soon as I was awake, I felt depressed and anxious about a serious family situation which has been stalking our family for a number of years. But as I lay in bed, I remembered how Christ recited Scripture when he was challenged by Satan. You find this in Matthew 4 and in Luke chapter 4. So I decided to read the words that God inspired to be written to us. And I did that selectively. I read Psalms that I always found encouraging. I decided to read Psalm 103 in the middle of the night. I did it on my phone, so I wouldn't disturb Jackie and turn on the light. So I just read it on my phone. I read Psalm 103, and I came across verses 15 through 17. I read it many times as I was a kid, but this time it spoke to me differently. I'll read it from the Complete Jewish Bible. Now, I was feeling at that moment, I was very anxious about the welfare of my family and one particular family member. And I came across these words. It says, yes, a human being's days are like grass. He sprouts like a flower in the countryside. But when the wind sweeps over it, it's gone, and its place knows it no more. But the mercy of Adonai, or the mercy of the Lord, is on those who fear him from eternity past to eternity future. And his righteousness extends to his children's children. Wow. Now, I don't know of any way to unanxious myself. I don't know of any formula, or any pixie dust. I do know we can pray. So I prayed. That night, finally realizing I had no other option available to me, I prayed. And I decided to pray a different kind of prayer than I had been praying. One based on a number of scriptures, as I understand them. Here are a few of these scriptures. James 1, verse 17. From the Complete Jewish Bible. James 1, verse 17 reads, every good act of giving and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father, who made the heavenly lights. With him there is no variation nor darkness caused by turning. Psalm 27, verse 1. This is a psalm that when I was a little kid, my mom would have me read many times before I went to bed, had me memorize it. Psalm 27, verse 1 says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalm 91, verses 1 through 2. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him I will trust. Mark 9, verses 14 through 24. Mark 9, verses 14 through 24. And when he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them, and scribes disputing with them. Immediately, when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed, and running to him, greeted him. And he asked the scribes, what are you discussing with them? Then one of the crowd answered and said, Teacher, I brought you my son, who has a mute spirit. And wherever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples that they should cast it out, but they could not. He answered him and said, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me. Then they brought him to him. And when he saw him, immediately the spirit convulsed, and he fell on the ground and wallowed, foaming at the mouth. So he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. And often he has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus said to him, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Immediately, the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. So what did I pray that night? I said something along these lines. I said, Father, you're my salvation, my rock, and my fortress. I believe. Well, I want to believe, but I'm deficient, and I have doubts. Please help my unbelief. Please take away the fear. Take away the anxiety. Take away the discomfort in the pit of my stomach, the feelings that are making it difficult for me to sleep. Calm my spirit and give me peace. And it didn't happen right away, but soon after that, I felt totally calm and at peace. I didn't notice when it happened, but I fell asleep. And I don't usually get to sleep that easily. When I got up, I felt that I must have fallen asleep soon after I prayed. God didn't promise to remove every obstacle in this life when we want or when we expect it to be removed. He didn't promise to relieve us of every pain. He didn't promise that we wouldn't be faced with threats and scary things. But he did inspire the following to be written in Numbers 6, verses 24 through 29. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. And he also wrote from Philippians, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Now, just in conclusion, I'd like to just share the lyrics of a song that I love. I don't know if you got my text and if we could play the song, but I just want to read some of the lyrics from this song. I think most of you have heard it. No longer slaves. I just cut it out. He says, I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I'm a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Oh, I am a child of God. He says, you unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies until all my fears are gone. He says, from my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. Remember what I spoke about earlier? About that court that rendered a judgment in favor of people who had not yet been born. Who's to say that we weren't there in that discussion? You have chosen me. Your love has called my name, and I've been born again into your family. Oh, your blood flows through my veins. I'm surrounded by the arms of the Father. I'm surrounded by songs of deliverance. We've been liberated from our bondage. We're the sons and the daughters. Let us sing our freedom. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me. Think about the times God has rescued us. I don't know about all of you, but God has rescued me. And I mean literally. I don't mean just in the way I understand things and the things I understood. I mean rescued me from literal physical danger. You rescued me, and I will stand and sing. I am a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God. Yes, I am a child of God.